The rejection email hadn't even arrived yet, but Aarav Malik already felt it burning in his chest as he stepped out of the towering glass building into the harsh daylight. The sun was high over the city, traffic humming, people rushing past with iced coffees and briefcases, unaware that his world had just quietly cracked. He paused at the top of the marble stairs, gripping the strap of his worn leather bag, trying to swallow the humiliation that tasted like metal in his mouth. He had just failed the most important interview of his life. If you believe in kindness and second chances, take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Whisper Tales 3. Stories like this remind us that sometimes the world changes in a single, unexpected moment. Aarav descended the steps slowly, each one heavier than the last. Inside that building, beneath glittering chandeliers and walls covered in modern art, he had stumbled over his words. Months of preparation had dissolved under the polite but distant smiles of the interview panel. When they asked about his 5-year vision, all he could see was his 5-year-old daughter Meher sitting at their tiny kitchen table, coloring with broken crayons while waiting for him to come home. He had spoken about stability, about needing a chance more than anything, and he saw it in their eyes. The subtle shift from interest to doubt. Need sounded like weakness in rooms like that. The job at Orion Global Ventures was supposed to be his breakthrough. After his wife Sana passed away 2 years ago from a sudden illness, Aarav had become both mother and father. He worked nights at a warehouse, slept in fragments, and spent his mornings packing Meher's school lunch with notes that read, "Papa believes in you." He had once been a rising marketing executive full of ideas and confidence, but grief had a way of dismantling ambition. Bills piled up. Opportunities slipped through his fingers. Today's interview was his last shot before their landlord's patience ran out. The sun felt unforgiving as he reached the sidewalk. Office workers brushed past him, their laughter sharp against his silence. He imagined going home and forcing a smile for Meher. He imagined telling her that Papa would figure something out, that everything would be okay, even though he no longer knew if that was true. His phone buzzed in his pocket, and for a foolish second he thought it might be good news. It was only a reminder about the overdue electricity bill. Inside the building he had just left, the Billionaire CEO, Rishan Khanna, stood by the window of his private office overlooking the street. He had watched the interviews on a live feed, a habit he kept to understand not just resumes but people. He had seen Aarav's file, solid experience, a gap in employment, modest references. Nothing extraordinary on paper. But during the interview there had been something in the way Aarav spoke about rebuilding brand trust, about loyalty being earned, not demanded. It wasn't polished. It was raw. It was honest. And when he mentioned his daughter, his voice had carried a quiet desperation that didn't sound manipulative. It sounded real. Rishan had built Orion Global Ventures from nothing after growing up in a one-room apartment himself. He recognized the look in Aarav's eyes as he left the conference room. It was the look of someone who had been strong for too long and was running out of strength. The panel had already moved on to the next candidate, checking boxes, discussing metrics. But Rishan couldn't shake the feeling that they were about to let something rare walk away. Outside, Aarav reached the corner, waiting for the pedestrian light to change. He felt smaller than the skyscrapers towering above him. He told himself he should have been more confident, should have hidden his struggles better. The signal turned green, and he stepped forward, blending into the crowd. Behind him, the glass doors burst open. Rishan Khanna, a man usually surrounded by assistants and security, was jogging down the steps in broad daylight, ignoring the stunned looks from his employees. He didn't care about appearances. He only cared about the tightening in his chest that told him he would regret it if he did nothing. Aarav heard someone call his name. He turned, startled, as the CEO himself approached, slightly out of breath. For a split second, Aarav assumed he had forgotten something inside. Instead, Rishan's expression was thoughtful, almost urgent. They stood on the sidewalk, traffic roaring by, sunlight glinting off the glass towers. Rishan told him that the interview panel thought he lacked confidence, that his answers weren't structured enough. Aarav nodded, humiliation flooding back. He began to apologize. But Rishan raised a hand gently and said something that stopped him cold. He said that confidence can be trained, structure can be taught, but integrity cannot be manufactured. He said he had built his company on instinct as much as numbers, and his instinct told him that Aarav understood people in a way spreadsheets never could. Aarav felt as if the ground had shifted beneath him. He wasn't being offered pity, he was being offered belief. Rishan explained that instead of the advertised position, he wanted Aarav to join a new community outreach initiative Orion was planning. One focused on rebuilding small local businesses affected by economic downturns. It would require empathy, resilience, and someone who knew what it meant to start over. The salary was modest at first but would grow with results. It wasn't charity, it was opportunity. In that blinding midday sun, surrounded by strangers who had no idea life was changing before their eyes, Aarav felt tears sting his vision. He thought of Meher's drawings taped to their fridge. He thought of the nights he had nearly given up. He realized that sometimes failure isn't the end of the road. It's the detour that leads you exactly where you're meant to be. He accepted. The weeks that followed were not magically easy. Aarav worked tirelessly, visiting struggling shop owners, listening to their stories, helping them rebrand and market their services. He remembered what it felt like to sit on the other side of rejection, and he treated every client with dignity. Slowly, the initiative gained traction. Small stores saw profits rise. Communities began to trust Orion not as a corporate giant, but as a partner. At home, the changes were quieter, but just as powerful. Meher noticed that Papa smiled more. The electricity bill was paid. The landlord stopped knocking. One bright afternoon, Aarav attended Meher's school assembly without worrying about lost wages. As she waved at him from the stage, he realized that the interview he had failed had given him something far greater than a title. It had given him back his hope. Months later, during a company town hall held in full daylight in the same glass building, Rishan publicly acknowledged Aarav's leadership in transforming the outreach program into one of Orion's most successful ventures. Employees applauded, but what mattered most to Aarav was not the applause. It was the memory of standing on that sidewalk, feeling invisible, and then being seen. Before we close, if this story touched your heart even a little, please take a second to engage with the video. Your support helps stories of hope and resilience reach more people who might need them. And a special request, comment below with one word that represents what this story made you feel. Because sometimes, the difference between failure and destiny is a single person willing to run after you. In the brightness of an ordinary day, when everything seems lost, kindness can still find you. And for one single father who thought he had failed, the moment he walked away was the very moment his life began to change forever.